questions.
That were the questions? Okay, thank you very much for the good questions. And we continue now to the last part, which is focusing on the application of the scientific knowledge built up so far. And now we are going to approach our own 21st century. And I will now step in with the 19th century. There was then a considerable number of philosophers who put consciousness first, including the so-called idealists. And most of them derived their ideas from classical Greek and Roman thinkers, and also sometimes from Indian philosophy, which also became available in the West in the 19th century. But unfortunately, these thinkers had little impact on people's thinking in general. Meanwhile, a great rigidity and dogmatism had developed also in science. But at the end of the 19th century, this changed. And we see then also Madame Blavatsky coming into the picture. And she predicted in 1888 the following. She said, between now and 1897, a great tear will be made in the veil of nature, and materialistic science will receive a fatal blow. And this prediction came true. We see in 1895 Röntgen, who discovered the heart radiation, which was named after him. In 1896 we see Becquerel, who discovered the radioactive radiation of uranium, using earlier experiments carried out by Professor William Crookes. Radioactivity is radiation, as you may know, released during the disintegration of matter. That is matter that is becoming increasingly unstable and becoming ethereal. Then, followed by the discovery of Mr. and Mrs. Curie with the discovery of the power of radioactivity. And further research showed that atoms have their own structure, as described by Rutherford and Niels Bohr's models, resembling a solar system in small. In essence, the new scientific thoughts come down to the idea that force, energy, and matter are one. Force or energy is matter in motion, and matter is crystallized radiation or force. And this idea is identical with the Theosophical point of view. In the 19th and further 20th century, much scientific progress was made during this period. There were some progressive scientists in the 20th century who saw consciousness as more fundamental than matter. Well-known names are Max Planck, Sir Arthur Eddington, Erwin Laszlo, and Rupert Sheldrake. But also, for instance, the Dutch cardiologist Pim van Lommel, who did a lot of research on near-death experiences. These researchers went against the strongly materialistic trend of the 20th century, a tendency that was only gradually challenged around the 1970s. In particular, I want to dwell for a moment on Max Planck, who lived earlier in the 20th century. He is one of the founders of the so-called quantum theory, and next week I will elaborate on that theory quite some more. And he is very interesting because if there is one scientist who made a significant contribution to breaking down the existing barrier between matter and energy or force, it was Max Planck. His intuition led him in 1900 to the idea that energy, like matter, consists of discrete quantities, and each quantity he called a quantum. So he no longer regarded energy as a continuous flow. Compare it to a stream of water from a tap. According to quantum theory, we should view that water stream as a series of discrete water particles. Perhaps well known, but Planck also had a clear vision about consciousness and matter. Once a reporter asked to Planck, "Do you think consciousness can be explained in terms of matter?" And he answered, "No, I consider consciousness to be fundamental. I consider matter to be derived from consciousness. Everything we regard as existing presupposes consciousness." So we see that already in the 20th century there are important developments in which scientists are increasingly moving away from an exclusive materialistic approach, that the relativity of force, energy and matter, and space and time is becoming an increasingly important element in science. That some scientists are also including the concept of consciousness in their view of reality, and not insignificant, that they sometimes feel they have to draw ethical conclusions from this. A small but growing group of scientists exploring nowadays the idea that consciousness is the basis of nature. A few assume cosmic consciousness is the foundation, as the source of all beings. And these pioneers try to find alternatives to the assumptions behind materialistic scientific theories. They often derive their ideas from the great thinkers of the past, from the Greek thinkers. And their pioneering work can have great impact on the future of science. The term most commonly used by these scientists with a new mentality indicate that intelligence or consciousness is leading and matter is following. And the term they use is Panpsychism. In other words, pan, everything, is animate. That means psyche stands for egoic consciousness. And this term, panpsychism, is used rather loosely. An important proponent of this panpsychism in the last 50 years is, for instance, the philosopher David Chalmers and several others. Within this group of scientists with panpsychism views, there are some who assume cosmic consciousness as the basis of all individual existence. And this position is often called cosmopsychism. The idea is that all-pervading cosmic consciousness is the ultimate source of all individual consciousnesses. Incidentally, no researcher pretends to paint a complete worldview, but the direction is interesting and very important. Some important researchers in this direction are, for instance, Itai Chani and Bernardo Kastrup. Let's have a look at Itai Chani's vision. Itai Chani starts from a cosmopsychism premise, which he defines as follows. The cosmos, seen as an overarching whole, is conscious and is the one foundation for all that exists. In an omnipresent field of consciousness, each individual manifested being has its origin, within which it has its temporary existence. On individual consciousness, IT says, the cosmic field carries all possible aspects of consciousness within it, just as white light contains all colors of light. And Chani compares it to emergent eddies in an immeasurable ocean. At this point, someone approaches Theosophy. What we don't find so far in Chani's views is the Theosophical basic idea that each center of consciousness has always existed and will always exist in eternity. Let's have a look at Bernardo Kastrup's vision. He assumes an all-encompassing cosmic consciousness. All individual consciousnesses are, according to him, the alter egos of the one cosmic consciousness. It is like a lamp shining through a lampshade with many holes. This view differs greatly from that of Theosophy, which assumes that we have constructed our present character ourselves in our past life. Kastrup further distinguishes between animate and inanimate nature. In his view, humans, animals, plants, and single-celled creatures are conscious, but not minerals and atoms. Moreover, in his view, Kastrup is an absolute idealist. The external world exists only within consciousness, and thus he deviates considerably from the Theosophia. I also would like to mention another example of a scientist who did not stand out so much for his views on consciousness and matter, but who had a great eye for the role science should play in society. His name is Jacques Fresco. He became known as a brilliant researcher and designer. Among other things, he participated in the Manhattan Project in World War II that was about making nuclear weapons, but he went on to focus mainly on socially important projects. He is one of the founders of the NGO The Venus Project, that is a social and economical system with a sustainable resource-based economy where technology and automation are not used for profit, but to improve living standards for all human beings. But his statements on the role of science are particularly interesting. He said, scientists who spend their whole lives working on one problem will never be able to look at the problem of humanity objectively. Their views are simply one-sided. But his main expression is interesting. He said, a real scientist should solve the global problems of humanity. Scientists with this new mindset are, with their efforts, a huge incentive to do science with a very open mind, including and especially testing its basic assumptions. And such an attitude carries important potential because all these ideas are closely intertwined with ethics, and this is what these researchers find of great importance. We go to learning lessons. Think carefully about the fundamental starting points of any philosopher or scientist. Are they logical and universal? But also think about the ethical conclusions. Are they of benefit for all living beings? Finally, I want to summarize the lecture of today as follows. Universal science includes philosophical and religious perspectives. Universal science can therefore be found in the Theosophical, the synthesis of science, philosophy, and religion. In classical antiquity, in particular with the Greeks, many thoughts can be found of the Theosophia, such as those expressed in the 3 propositions of the secret doctrine. Universal scientific ideas recur in Western thought from the Renaissance onwards. Also now there are examples of scientists who start from the consciousness starting point and/or who emphasize that science should, above all, help solve all social problems. This is the presentation of today, and we will now have again a 3 minutes break in which you can put down your questions, and we will continue after 3 minutes. Thank you. Welcome back. Jenny, are there any questions?
No, there are no questions.
No question.
I want to thank you very much for this very powerful presentation, and I really think that the universal science has been given a place in the world. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, thank you all for your attention and your questions today. Then we move on to the lecture. Now, we first will have next week, Sunday, 26th of March, a study meeting. It will be about the contents of this lecture, and there will be a small reader also available in the course of this week. So if you want to attend after having seen this lecture, you can subscribe and you will receive in due time the reading material and also a link for the study of next week Sunday. And after 2 weeks we will continue with the lecture on metaphysics, beyond the limits of physics, in which we will explain a number of the key issues of the microcosmos and the macrocosmos, the fundamental problems that physics has in this fields of science, and which could be more approached in a fundamental way by using the starting points from Theosophy, enabling scientists to solve a number of really nasty problems and making it much more simple than science has made it up to now. So, but that will be in 2 weeks from now. I think we are going to conclude this evening by moving to the Gayatri Mantra as the conclusion of this evening, and it goes as follows. O thou golden sun of most excellent splendor, illumine our hearts and fill our minds, so that we, recognizing our oneness with the divinity, which is the heart of the universe, may see the pathway before our feet and tread it to those distant goals of perfection, stimulated by thine own radiant light.